Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode. Tricia, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, and I just realised that I normally record the podcast wearing my cap. I mainly do
Mm-hmm.
all of my content with my MTT Poker School snapback cap on,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not wearing it. And this is if you're watching the video, you'll be able to see this. If you're listening on the podcast, I'll try and describe what you can see. But basically, I've got my fourth lockdown haircut, and
Mm.
basically I look like an egg with hair on the top and the bottom. So that's exciting.
I can't wait to go get my hair cut now that you mention it.
I've seen some shockers, like
It's getting pretty long back here.
yeah,
Yep.
I've
Yep.
seen some, I mean, I just went for like the just shave it off. It's just easier to manage. It's amazing. I can get ready to go out really quickly now, except we can't go out, so that's
Um,
really useful. Um, but no, yeah. So just decided to get rid of it. But yeah, I've seen some absolute shockers when it comes to haircuts on social media. People just dying to get their haircut. Something I thought was interesting. I saw a tweet the other day. It was like one question we need to be asking ourselves is where are all these footballers getting their haircut? Because
oh yeah, good
it's like, hang
question.
on a minute, we're in lockdown still in the UK, and yet these footballers see their hair looks perfect. Like, so yeah, something's going on there where they're off out to get their haircut, or their hairdressers are coming to them more likely.
There was a situation here, and I think it was with the NBA because they had them in a bubble at Disney World.
Hmm.
So I think it was the NBA. It might have been the NFL. I don't know. It was a few months ago. Nonetheless, I'm just going to pretend that's what it was. But it's to your point. They had a barber, or maybe more than one barber, I don't know, but that was, in the bubble giving them the haircuts. And I think one of the barbers ended up testing positive for COVID. And so it ended up being kind of a mess. But I'm like, okay, first of all, yes, how lucky are you to have a barber like, oh, I need to trim,
Yeah.
right? So you're looking great. But on the other hand, you're in a bubble. Like, I thought that would be the safest of the safe. And, yeah, they still had an issue with it. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think that's the way that a lot of elite sport is going to keep their players in
Hmm.
bubbles. Certainly, the England cricket team, for example, they've been in a bubble, and some players have decided that they don't want to be part of the bubble, like for their mental health. I think like they just want to go back and spend time with their family. They don't want to have to just be in this bubble with the same group of people all the time. So I think
Hmm.
I think that's quite interesting. But there have been numerous stories of sports people breaking the bubble. There were two young England footballers, one of whom I thought was married with a kid, right? Ended up with
Mm.
two girls in their room, two girls in their hotel room. They
What?
were sent home. So yeah, that was, I mean, that wasn't good news. But it was all over social media, like Snapchat or Instagram or TikTok. I don't know what the kids are using these days. Um,
TikTok, you don't stop.
yeah,
We need to get on the TikTok. Where's our
maybe we do. Yeah.
poker on the mind TikToks?
Yeah, but you got to realize when you're an elite level sportsman that you probably, two girls in a foreign country probably going to try and get, video whatever they're doing, right? And I don't think it was,
What?
18 plus,
Say it
but
isn't
maybe it
so.
was. I don't know. But the actual video that went out was, clean, I believe. But yeah, not good, not good news. But poker wise, you been playing much, Trisha?
I mean, every time I have to do something aversive, like I talked about doing the taxes and doing the temptation bundling. And so right now I'm having to do a lot of cleaning, sorting, all that kind of thing because we're going to be moving house soon.
Oh, cool.
So whenever I do something aversive, yeah, I fire up the old. I'm playing on global right now, so it's not the best. No offense. I mean, if you want to sponsor us, I mean, it's great. But but yeah, I'll play a little bit. But you know what's kind of unfortunate about it is that because I play at such low stakes, because I don't have a lot of money on there, it's almost like I mean, it's good and it's bad. Okay, I don't really have to put too much cognitive effort into it, and that's kind of good, but it's kind of bad too, right? Because it's just very ABC. It's not, really delving into the deep questions. You see, I mean, the play is not good. All right. So, then that drives your win rate up. But I'm smart enough to know because, remember Bill Gates from the last episode. I'm smart enough to know that, like, that's not reality. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, once I go back to doing what I'm, you know, really likely to do, like the buy-ins that I'm going to be at and things like that, it's not going to be, where I can be sorting and cleaning and, oh, let me hit the button, and it's just very ABC, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've had a little play, but it's nothing like, the scoop, like I know you got coming up pretty soon. So, speaking of that, as your mental game coach, how are you preparing for the scoop?
That's a great question. So, as I've mentioned on previous episodes, I'm doing a lot more coaching and making content and things like that rather than playing. So, I almost feel like I'm, watching the how to deadlift videos on YouTube and not putting the reps in at the gym. So I think I think I'm going to be kicking up the preparation, but a lot of preparing for big series like this doesn't really come in the few weeks leading up to it. It's very rare that you're going to be able to make such an impact in your game in the last few weeks. But actually it comes from, the countless hours you've been putting in since the last scoop. Like I always, reflect when there's a series, and after the last scoop I set myself a plan, and for the most part have stuck to it, but certainly not playing as much and not getting the reps in. But something that I find really, really useful, Pio Solver, we talked about this on the last episode, whether it was called Pio Solver or Pio Solver. But so Pio just brought out a new version, 2.0, and in there they have a built-in GTO trainer. So I've been using simple GTO trainer to sort of run spots, and it's really good to get the reps in. But now that Pio has one built in, it's really clean and smooth, and I've been using it, and it's just a really quick way of getting in like 100 hands in one spot, and then looking at something else. So I'm playing 1 or 2 times a week at the moment, and still identifying areas that I want to work on. And so when I find an area that let's say that I've marked a few hands and a number of them are very similar spot, maybe like playing out of position as the preflop raiser, then I can go in and I can run a script and then use the new GTO trainer within Pio and go through 100 hands in half an hour, and then it will show me where I'm making the biggest EV mistakes. And of course, like, this is if you're playing against a bot or playing against someone playing close to optimal or playing optimal. But of course, like you're not trying to play perfectly. It's I feel like when I play these the simple GTO trainer or the GTO trainer in Pio or other there are other ones available like DTO, for example. When I use them, I'm like, okay, so this is what I think the solver is going to do, but in practice I probably wouldn't do this because of X, Y, and Z. And I think that I think that's a really useful thought process. Like, because in order to exploit, you need to know what the fundamental is. Where's the equilibrium? Where's the baseline? So once you understand that and you see, okay, well, I ran a hand yesterday, multi-way spot. So a friend of mine had a hand and he opened from early position, middle position called, low jack calls, flop comes king, queen, deuce. My friend checks, middle position bets, low jack folds, and my friend calls. He has ace queen, so king, queen, deuce. Check calls with ace queen. Turn is a king. He checks, and then the middle position player bets again, quite small, and my friend calls, and then the river is an ace. So the board reads king, queen, deuce, king, ace, and my friend has ace queen. So he checks, and middle position goes all in.
Ooh.
And we were looking at this spot and thinking, wow, it's really tough to find bluffs, right? And we were thinking, like, where do you find your bluffs from here? Because like Jack 10 suited gets there.
Yeah.
Maybe 10-9 suited is a hand, but like I'm not even sure that he has it at full frequency to call pre-flop. And then so we were really struggling. And then so we run it in simple 3-way and to have a look. And basically the middle position player has to start bluffing hands like sixes, for example.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
To get you to, like, on a king queen deuce board, get you to fold like 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, maybe some like ace x hands. So without a flush draw, for example. But without knowing what middle position is supposed to do, you can't really like you have the intuition that it's really hard for him to find bluffs, right? But
Yeah.
until you see that, like, okay, he's supposed to be bluffing like sixes, sevens. There was like an ace five suited in there. You know, it's always in there. And but until you see it, you don't know what the exploit is. So we saw that, and then we can say, okay, we don't think population is taking a hand like pocket sixes in that spot and just running it right, starting to bluff it
Right.
on the flop, betting turn, and then jamming river to try to get you to fold.
Right.
Your bluff catchers. So yeah, we just don't think that's happening. So we node locked it for getting rid of those, those bluffs, and then he had a 0% calling range on the river. So this,
Wow.
so like, which is not a good situation. So massively, exploitable because he's folding a lot. But if this is why like it's important to understand the equilibrium to be able to exploit, but also recognizing that if you do fold there, then it's quite an easy exploit to, I just need to take my small pairs and triple barrel them off. But I just don't think population's doing that. And I think it's like, but yeah. So the key point here, before I waffle anymore, is to understand what the equilibrium looks like. And if you don't, you should go and run it and see what it looks like. And then ask yourself, is population playing anywhere close to that?
I mean, if you're playing against like a Christoph Vogelsang, right? Maybe he is,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to rethink this. But if you're on global with me, but it's kind of funny while you were saying that. I was like, oh, on global, you're definitely, yeah, it's an interesting landscape. But on the other hand, when you are playing the kind of lower stakes games, they've maybe seen or heard or read somewhere like, oh, the only way you can win on the river, is
Yeah.
to bet. So like they very well could be taking the ace five there or the small pairs or something like that because that's what they've heard. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
very population dependent to some extent, right?
Yeah, I think that like I just feel like population, they have
Yeah.
sixes
No,
in that
I
spot in middle
completely,
position, and
yeah,
they're just like, oh man, missed the flop, like just check
yeah,
and give up. They're not going,
yeah.
oh, I can get these pairs to fold, you know.
I completely agree with you, but I just wanted to point out that, sometimes you are going to see some freaky things if you're playing at the lower stakes. But that doesn't mean that happens regularly just because I saw one guy go
Yeah.
bananas with pocket twos there.
Something that I
Right.
think is something you should always think about is rather than thinking they always have it and no one ever
Mm-hmm.
bluffs, they
Mm-hmm.
have it most of the time
Yeah.
and they just don't bluff quite enough.
Yeah.
That's a good way to look at it. But then you do land in like circular thinking territory. You're like, well, if I start folding my ace queen on this river,
Mm-hmm.
then all he needs to do is just start running it with sixes and sevens and ace five suited and things like that. So you just go back and forth. So I think playing close to equilibrium could be quite useful, especially against very good players.
But I think you also have to realize, how you're going down that rabbit hole?
Yeah.
That is assuming that they are noticing what you're doing and then they're going, oh, okay, well, he's folding a lot here. So that means I'm going to, bluff more. Okay, well, they have to recognize what you're doing. They also have to figure out the counter exploit. They have to pull the trigger on the counter exploit, right? There's a lot that has to go on, and they have to have, a very reasonable level of training.
Yeah.
And do they have that?
Very good
So I'm
question.
not saying, always err on the side of caution, but I'm kind of saying err on the side of caution before you go down a rabbit hole, because what you're doing, in a sense, is projecting onto them. Because you're like, oh, I think of it this way, so they must think of it this way. Or I see it this way, they must see it that way, right? And that type of projection is often just not what is going on.
Yeah, very, very true. And I talked about this with my group yesterday after the webinar. I do a webinar every Monday,
Mm-hmm.
and we talked about how you believe that someone's capable of doing this mainly because
Mm-hmm.
you've been studying and you are
Yeah.
capable of this, right? So, and then you just believe that, oh well, he might have seen this content, he might understand that he's supposed to three bet here or he's supposed to triple barrel here or whatever. But most of the time, players, if it's spots that don't come up very often, chances are that they have not studied it well enough to to put you in, a really tough spot. So I think, I think there's lots of things to think about. But I think I do think that if you are just learning the game and then you suddenly getting into game theory, you go too far the other way. You over adjust, and I think it's maybe this is why going straight to PIO when you're playing super low stakes is not a good idea. But I would argue and push back on that you got to how do you exploit if you don't know what the where the equilibrium is, right? As we've just been talking about. So I think it's important to know what what it's supposed to look like, and I'm doing air quotes on the video for our podcast listeners, but and then be able to deviate based on how you believe that this player or population is going to be playing. But I have a hand sent in, Tricia, that I think we should get into. So it's from France.
Oh, from France, the country, or from France, the person?
Well, interestingly, I would say France for the country.
France.
So this is from France, who I presume is either from Germany or Austria or Switzerland or maybe
welcome
none of those
to
countries.
Our international community.
And he says, "Hi Tricia and Gareth, got a fun hand here from a $55 MTT on PokerStars. 6-handed, low jack who has a big stack opens for a min raise, and I call with Queen 8 of clubs on the button with 44 big blinds behind. The blinds fold. The flop is 10 of spades, 8 of hearts, 4 of clubs. The low jack bets 4 big blinds into 6.25 big blinds, and I call. So just a quick reminder, Hero here has Queen 8 of clubs. The flop is 10, 8, 4 rainbow with 1 club. So Hero holding second pair with various backdoor draws. So Hero calls. The turn is the jack of clubs. The low jack bets 9 bigs into 14.25 big blinds, and I call again. So Hero now has a pair and a flush draw and a gut shot. The river is the 7 of diamonds, and the low jack now checks. So the board reads 10 of spades, 8 of hearts, 4 of clubs, jack of clubs, 7 of diamonds. I think it's pretty obvious that the low jack has a one pair type hand and isn't happy with the run out. So should I turn my hand into a bluff to try to make him fold? I have plenty of 9x in my range as played. Congrats on your 100th episode, by the way. Keep up the good work, France. So a great hand. And I really like that he's thinking about what his range looks like on the river. Let me throw it over to you before I give you my thoughts, Tricia. What do you think? Should we be turning our third pair into a bluff here?
Well, what else are we going to do with it?
Well, we could check.
No, the reason I said that is because I had said, you heard from Doyle Brunson that the only way to win is to bet on the river.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
Don't just bet, jam. Because, you got to show that force. Going back, how much did the low jack bet on the flop?
4 bigs into 6.25, so just under 2/3 pot.
Okay, and then on the turn, he bet about the same size again, right?
9 into 14.25. So, yeah, pretty much.
I just want to make sure I have all my. Okay, so I think this is an excellent question, because a lot of people, and it's been very popular in the poker community, that they're like, oh, well, you have to have some, what is it? Okay, I'm not saying this very well. So you can square us up on this. Okay. There's the concept of, bluff catching and showdown value, I guess, is what I'm kind of thinking of in my mind. So you can square us up. So our friend here, he's like, oh, okay, I've got third pair. So then he goes, okay, is that enough for showdown value? But, and I'm sure you're going to, drive our bus correctly down the street here on what we should do, right?
I'll do my best.
Yeah. So carry on.
Okay. Yeah. So I think it's not so much bluff catching, but turning a hand into a bluff. And so recognizing, do you have
Yeah,
enough
yeah,
showdown value? If not, is it a good hand to bluff with? Like, I think it's a
yeah.
common misconception that like you land on the river and you're like, I don't think I ever win if I check, so I'm going to turn my hand into a bluff. Like, I don't think that's a good way to think about it. I think you're going to land on the river with lots of hands that don't win at showdown in that case, and if you end up bluffing with all of them, then you are way overdoing it. And but yeah, I mean, what I think was just slightly wrong with the thinking here was this line that said, I think it's pretty obvious that the low jack has a one pair type hand and isn't happy with the run out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's true. I think that the low jack could definitely have hands like ace king, ace queen, king queen, just some random backdoor flush draw they've decided
Right.
to bet. So like, I don't think that he always has a pair that he's not happy with. So I actually think that queen eight is doing pretty well here, and you can just check back. So not that much of an interesting hand, but I do think it's always good to think about why what kind of hands should you be bluffing with. I as I said, so now that we know that queen eight is a good hand to go ahead and check back, I think it's enough showdown value against, he can't just triple it off with ace king, ace queen, king queen, stuff like that in this
Mm-hmm.
spot. So we get to check it and win against those hands. And of course, when we check, like, we lose some of the time, right? He is going to check some
Yeah,
one pair type hands. He might even
yeah.
check some two pair type hands on this run out. So we are going to lose, like, but that's poker. Like, you can't expect to win every time, and then if you don't win, then you just shove and hope to get them to fold. What I do think is interesting though, on this run out, one pair hands are not loving it. Like, absolutely, they're,
Right, right.
even if he has like aces or kings or something like that here, I don't think that he's like, when he checks and we jam river, like, I don't think he can call. I think we've got we do have a lot of 9x hands here. We're going to have hands like queen 9 suited, we're going to have jack 9, 10 9, pocket nines. So we do have a decent number of straights. I think we're going to have like 9 8 suited, maybe even 9 7 suited as well. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we've got plenty of straights. And I also think that we have much worse hands than third pair to bluff with. So if we think that queen 8 has enough showdown value, but we have other hands that never win at showdown, like they're, or very rarely win at showdown. I'm thinking more like a king queen ourselves, right? We could float the flop with king queen with a backdoor flush draw,
Mm-hmm.
then we improve to a straight draw on the turn, and we call again, and then we land on the river, and we're like, well, I can get him to fold ace high. I can get him to actually fold all the one pair hands that we just talked about, like over pairs and just like some kind of jack X hand or something like that. So yeah, I think that would be a much better hand to go ahead and bluff in this situation.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Thanks very much.
So,
So, like,
oh, that's why you're the coach.
I said earlier on that, okay, it's not, maybe not that interesting a hand, but actually, the more I think about it, the more I sort of talk the hand through. There's some important decision points here. The thought process of, like, is your hand good enough to win at showdown, and then are there worse hands in your range that would benefit from getting folds, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
like, the only reason to bet here is if you believe that you make more money or more EV than checking, right? But sometimes you're going to bet and lose, and that's not a good thing. But when you can, when you check, you can just you can see the showdown and sometimes win. So you definitely want to be taking hands that have really no showdown value whatsoever, and bluffing with them.
Yeah, that's very good.
But I do guess that, like, kind of goes against what I just said a few moments ago when I was like, just because you can't win a showdown doesn't mean that it's a good reason to bet. But I think that it's important to, you have to have some bluffs, and taking the worst hands you land on the river with to bluff with is probably quite a good idea.
There's nothing worse too than, you know, let's say he takes a queen eight hand, right? And let's say he's betting the river. He's whatever. He's betting the river, right? He's like, "Oh, I'm going to turn it into a bluff." And then you get check raised or whatever,
Yeah, well, I
right?
think if he does bet, he probably has to jam. So he has just, I believe,
Yeah.
just less than pot, if my calculations are correct. He has like 30 bigs back into, yeah, is that right? 30 bigs back into a pot of about 32 bigs, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and you know, if you're going to if you're going to value bet this river, you're probably going to jam a 9, right? You
Mm-hmm.
put your opponent in the cage. So I think that
Yeah.
it makes sense to be bluffing, you know, the king queen type hands
But
as
you know
well as
how
a bluff.
like you can get caught in those situations where, you're not jamming the river, but like I said, you took the hand which had some showdown value, but then like you get check jammed on and then you're like, oh, you know,
Yeah,
which I'm not talking about being results oriented, but I'm just saying like, oh, this is something that happens. And when something like that happens, I think you have to stop and, say, oh, did I do the right thing here? Did I make a mistake? Was this woolly thinking, that got me into this?
yeah,
Right. Maybe it was
absolutely.
fine, but maybe it wasn't. Right.
Hmm.
But you'll know it when you've stepped into a situation that's ripe for study because you'll feel it. You'll be like, oh, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that felt a little nasty right there.
Yeah, for sure. So I think like
Yeah.
the important thing from this is just that little sentence that was, I think it's pretty obvious that the low jack has a one pair type hand and isn't happy with the run out. So like I agree that he's not going to want to call with those one pair type
Hmm.
hands like aces and kings here, just absolutely hating life. But you actually can still win. So queen eight's just the wrong kind of hand choice for bluffing in this situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That is, it's
brilliant,
really
yeah,
good.
brilliant
Yeah.
hand, Franz, and thanks so much for sending that in. And do you want to know the result? I know our listeners. They're like, yeah, we want to know the result. Tell me the result.
Yeah. Of course, tell them the results. It's always fun to hear how it turned out.
I'll tell you something about being results orientated in a minute because I think it's important to talk about it before we wrap things up. Um, so yeah, France checked back and the low jack had pocket aces.
Oh, wow.
To win the pot. So yeah, I mean, I think I think that's going to happen, right? He is going to have
Yeah.
those hands, but you have worse hands in your range to get him to fold his fold aces, and you are going to win enough of the time when you go for a check back there. So something I just thought was interesting about results oriented thinking is I can't remember if it was earlier in this episode or maybe in the last episode we were talking about the GTO trainer apps. I think it was at the start of this one.
This one.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and we talk, you can run hands and there's what they do is they give you feedback, right? And when you
Hmm.
play poker, you don't get any feedback
Yeah.
because you shouldn't be relying on the result to tell you whether you played a hand right or wrong. So when you use these apps, they tell you like how much EV you lose. So like you play a hand, right? And so let's just use the DTO app as an example. I was playing it in bed, and I don't normally take my phone to bed. It's
Mm.
definite no, as you would say, Tricia. Trying to no technology after 9.
Yep.
But anyway, so I was playing on DTO in bed, and my girlfriend's next to me, and she's reading a book, and I got 48 out of 48 in one hand, and it said excellent. And I showed it to her, and I said, "Oh, look, I got 48 out of 48." Like, it won't mean anything to her. I just thought it was funny. I said, "I got 48, 48." I got, and the reason why I showed her is because I went, "Look, it says excellent. I got full marks, but I lost the hand." And she said, "Well, how does that work?" And that and that is it in a nutshell, right? That is poker in a nutshell. That when you play,
Hmm.
you don't get the feedback. But when you use these apps, you get the feedback as whether or not you played the hand well. It still doesn't
Right.
mean that you win the hand. And I think that once you understand that, then you can start to make real progress in your poker game. But I do think it's interesting because I use these apps and I'm like hoping to see like full marks every time, no loss in EV. And then I'm doing it, and then I win the hand, and I'm like, what did he have? What did he have? And so I'm still focusing on what he ended up having, when actually we should be moving away from that. But I think it's just a natural human reaction. You just want
Hmm.
to see what they had in that particular spot.
Yeah, it's the whole curiosity factor, right? You're just
Exactly.
like,
Yeah.
what could he have had there? Or what could she have had there? What were they doing that with? Right?
Exactly.
That's always the question we want to know. So I think that's super funny. I think it's also funny that she's like, you lost the hand. She's almost like, what's wrong with you?
She just couldn't work it out. She was like, "How do you play a
No.
hand 48 out of 48 and still lose? That those two things don't work like that. How does that? Yeah, how does that work?" So
That's why poker is like the ultimate mental challenge
yeah.
because you can do everything right and you still don't win.
Exactly.
Good times.
Welcome to the wonderful world of poker.
Exactly.
Well, let's wrap things up there. Thanks again, Franz, for sending in such a great hand. Tricia, where can people
Yeah.
find you?
You can check me out over at my Facebook group, Poker Mindset Mastery Lab. Don't forget, I've got the 10-minute tilt cure on sale at peakpokermindset.com. You're definitely going to want to get that so that you don't get caught in the woolly thinking, because that would be really, really bad. How about you, Gareth? Where can people find you?
So I also have a Facebook group. Come on over and join it. Tournament poker focused Facebook group. Check out the link in the show notes or in the description on the video, depending on where you're consuming this podcast. And
Yeah.
hope to see you in there.
Great. See you next time.
All right, Tricia, it's been a blast. Everyone else out there, take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.